Yo, check this out. This is Wayne Wonder, representing for Warieka LTV. You see the vision, don't it? See the vision. Warieka LTV. Keep it locked.
No, I'm gonna tell you. We, us as bloggers, these are the issues that we need to address. You understand what I say? You see? Set the path for the youth. Share, like, and subscribe and stay tuned to the channel. I don't know all this. Yes, I. Greetings once again in the mighty name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. You see, and all things that's good. Welcome our viewers and subscribers. See? Viewers, if you like the content, man, welcome to the club. Subscribe and join and make way help grow the thing. You see? Now I'm gonna continue the reading from the book Marley and I. See? And you don't know, we just try explore from somebody who was quite close to Bob Marley, you know, the nature of Bob Marley. We try explore the nature of Bob Marley and see if we can, you know, learn anything. See? So we'll continue with the book. Making It in the Land of Opportunity. USA version. See? That's chapter 3. Unlike Bob's short sojourn with his mother in the USA, my escape to the good life took me into the gateway of music. On my arrival, I picked up on the contacts I had made in the Bahamas and Jamaica. One of the first people I got in touch with was Dizzy Jones. I had met Dizzy Jones and his group, consisting of 2 guys called Sam and Dave, after they had been stranded in Jamaica by Stephen Hill following a failed concert. They had been staying at Mistress Enid's Bruce guest house, where Hill lodged his second-rate stars. Sam and Dave was trying to earn enough money to pay their fare back to Miami. In my first booking anywhere, I contacted Freddie Chin, who, like his friend Billy Furnham, drove a big white fishtail Cadillac and staged a lot of foreign shows. Though his main occupation was to bring in female dancers from the Dominican Republic, one evening I took Sam, Dave, and Dizzy to the Club Havana to meet Freddie, who hired them for a week so that they could earn their fare back home. Sam, Dave, Dizzy, and I became close, and they told me that if I ever got to Miami, they would repay the favor. On my arrival in Miami, I headed straight for the hotel of 7th Avenue, where they lived. Miami was then still fairly segregated, with its black population herded into the Overtown area. The hotel was an all-night hangout for hustlers, party people, drinkers, and prostitutes. Its room came in 3 prices: $8 with the bathroom down the hall, $10 with the toilet and no shower, and $15 for a room with toilet and shower. The hotel was owned by a light brown blind man whose family was rich and involved in politics. It was at this same hotel that one of Miami's biggest disc jockey, Butterball, lived, a Miami legend. Butler worked at radio station WMBM, which was #1 station in Miami, often hosted a cookout for kids. 1 block from the hotel, right in the middle of a black neighborhood, was the #1 club in Miami, the white-owned Sir John's Night Beat. A couple of blocks away was the Cargo Hotel, which, with the Night Beat Club, formed the core of the exciting Miami nightlife. Dizzy, Sam, or Dave were all happy to see me when we finally met the next morning. Dizzy asked what I would be doing. I told him I was here to try to make it. He offered me a night job waiting tables at his club in Liberty City. After that meeting, I went and had breakfast, eggs, grit, and coffee for 39 cents. The first week of waiting table at Dizzy's club, I earned $60 plus about $8 a night in tips. After paying rent, I had $65 left in my pocket. A few days later, I met a girl, and we went about a lot together. One day, claiming to have forgotten her purse at home, she asked me to lend her $40. I did and never saw her or my money again. I record the incident here for posterity to show that Don Taylor, super hustler, was himself once hustled. I found out later she was a heroin addict. To make ends meet, I realized that I had to find something to do during the days. I went to the employment agency and got a few days' work at a bagel bakery. The following week, I was sent to Denny's restaurant on the beach to watch dishes for $1.40 per hour, then the minimum wage. On my way to work at Denny's one day, I had my first brush with American racism. The bus I had boarded for the ride to the beach suddenly stopped at the police station next to the bridge. The driver ordered all niggers and colored people off the bus. I later learned that there was a pass system in effect requiring black people to check in with the police. You had to tell the police where you were going, why, and how long your business would take. If you were caught on the beach after the stated time, you would be arrested for loitering with intent to steal. During my 3rd week in Miami, I met Dominic Schifoni, Jackie Wilson's manager, who had toured with him in Jamaica. He used his influence to get me a job carrying bags in the Miami Beach Crown Hotel. A week later, fortune smiled on me again. Jerry Butler came to the Sir John's Night Beat Club to work for the weekend, and upon seeing me again, immediately offered me $40 a week plus room and board to join his store as his valet. Sorry, as I start reading, get conscious, I'm a nostril and just always itch. I don't know why, it's a thing. Yeah. This innocent meeting turned out to be the beginning of my entry into show business in the United States, and the consequence, tremendous success that I have achieved today. We departed Miami a few days later, bound for Tampa, Florida, where we stayed at the Sheraton Hotel. The following morning, I ventured out on the road looking for something to eat. Because I was not very familiar with American food, I stuck mostly to eating hamburgers or tuna fish sandwiches. When I entered this restaurant to order tuna fish and toast, the man behind the counter barked my order out as 1 tuna fish to go. Politely and innocently, I explained to him that I intended to eat my sandwich here. Handing me my sandwich in a paper bag, he said, "Boy, don't you know we don't allow niggers to eat in our restaurant?" Jerry worked his way up to the next city in Florida, Jacksonville, which had a much larger black population, and where we were to meet up with another tour starting there and including Sam Cooke, Chuck Jackson, the Drifters, the Shirelles, Patti LaBelle, and the Bluebells, and a host of unknowns such as Gladys Knight and the Pips. The tour was being promoted by Henry Wynn, an extraordinary black man whom I considered to be a legend. He represented what I thought I wanted to be at that time. It for no other reason than that he was everything to everybody. He owned a liquor store, and on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. He had an interest in the Forest Arm Hotel, the only hotel blacks could stay in at that time. He was also the #1 numbers man in Atlanta. His Auburn Avenue club drew a growing crowd of black consciousness leaders, including such stellar personalities as Martin Luther King, Andrew Young, and Jesse Jackson, and contributed to the sweet Auburn Avenue myth. Henry Wynn was single-handedly responsible for the growth of black music and black companies such as Motown. He was the first person to have the vision to take a group of acts on a bus tour of the USA. Initially, because most of the acts were black, this move was greeted with hostility. Later, Dick Clark used the same idea after watering it down with a mixture of mainly white plus a few black acts. His touring acts met with great success by appealing to the white audiences and became the star of Clark's empire. In contrast, Henry Wynn ended up dying in jail for a tax evasion, for no other reason than because he was a black man in a white-controlled world. The tour with Jerry Butler lasted 30 days and allowed me to see a part of American life, especially in the South, that I had never imagined possible. I witnessed behavior by white people that I could not have predicted, never having seen this side of them in Jamaica. Many a time we were refused logging in spite of having made reservation, simply because we were black. We would arrive at auditoriums and not be allowed to perform because we were black. In some auditoriums, black and white sat separately by chicken wires. Separated by chicken wires. The experience I obtained from this tour, by my exposure to those future greats as well as the management style of Henry Wynn and others, added to my later development as a successful manager. I did not miss the opportunity to watch and learn. With the tour at an end, Jerry returned to Chicago, his hometown, taking me along with him. We had 2 weeks between tours, and Jerry used the time to move into a new townhouse, which he had just purchased and which, to this day, he still occupies. I stayed at a nearby hotel. During the next 2 weeks, I helped Jerry move into his house and get ready for our next step, which was to be New York City at the famed Apollo Theater. A stopover I look forward to with great excitement. Jerry and I rode his Cadillac Eldorado from Chicago to New York. He alone did the driving. The one time he had allowed me to drive, I drifted over the side we drive on in Jamaica, and was spared a collision after, only because he woke up, grabbed the wheel, and steered us to safety. He never trusts my driving again. We arrived in New York and checked into the Gorham Hotel in 55th Street, on 55th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue, where we stayed for the duration of the performance. But during that week at the Apollo, I got into an argument with Jerry's personal percussionist and band leader, Jemo Thomas, about what I can't remember. Jamo, who was more important to the band than I was, demanded my dismissal, leaving Jerry no choice. I was fired and left behind in New York. The experience made me swear to become more important, indispensable even. In all my future roles in music, although I had only just arrived in New York, I had already met many show business people, including the charming Tammy Montgomery. The city and the music scene, however, still struck me as a jungle of confusion. After a few days of battering around New York, I called a friend of Jerry B's, Charles Macmillan, a school teacher in a small town in Pennsylvania, and he invited me to stay with him and his mother in Chesterfield, a seaport town so much like Kingston that I immediately felt at home. I made friends quickly with assorted pimps, hustlers, and prostitutes, not unlike the street people I had known in Jamaica. During my 4-month stay in Chesterfield, I kept in close contact with Tammy, who would later become famous as Tammy Terrell. Tammy was being managed then by the young heirs to the Gimbel's department store, who, at her request, gave me a job as a stock boy for a salary of $42 in the Gimbel's Germantown Square. It was during one of my treks from Chesterville to Germantown that I saw posters advertising an upcoming show at the Uptown Theatre featuring Little Anthony and the Imperials with Joe Tex, the Supremes, and the Temptation. Dan Taylor, that's why that book is not more successful. You make that book too much boy, you brother. You see, everybody, we don't want to know where you go through. The book is about Bob and I. We could have easily did, you make that book too much boys. Anxious to return to show business, I contacted Little Anthony and got back to the Valley job I had some 2 years before when they were in the Bahamas with the now famous Hubert's Law. The tour was a success, culminating with a final performance in Brooklyn, New York, where the Imperials were born and raised. After the tour, with my job with the Imperials only requiring 3 or 4 days per week of work, I began roaming the streets of Brooklyn and learning great street games. I briefly hustled numbers in a game similar to Japan in Jamaica, using my earnings to fund poker games called rent parties because the players all used their winnings to pay rent. Life in Brooklyn on the streets I found was no different than street life on Kingston waterfront. Everyone hustled to survive. During this time, I began to worry about my immigrant status. I had been in the US now for some 4 to 5 years illegally. Sooner or later, I would be caught and sent back to Jamaica. There were only 2 options open to me that might make my stay legal. One was to get an honorable discharge from the military. Get an honorable discharge from the military. The other was to marry a US citizen. The first option seemed unlikely, since joining the military required either resident migrant status or US citizenship. I explained my dilemma to a friend I'll call Miles, and he advised me to go to some country town and register for the draft. He suggested that when I registered, I act dumb and claimed that my father had been a US sailor. With the Vietnam War raging, he said the authorities was unlikely to check up on my story. I took his advice and it worked. In August 1965, I received a letter from the draft board ordering me to report for US military service in Philadelphia at 9 a.m. on October 25, 1965. After doing basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Fort Benning, Georgia, and attending airborne school, I was stationed in Fort Ord, California for the remainder of my tour of duty, assigned to the Special Services branch, the office responsible for providing entertainment to the armed force. Why not? I mean, why not? Oh my God. For 2 years, the army became the mother and father I had never had. For the first time in my life, I was under caring supervision, fed 3 meals a day, given clothes to wear, and treated to free dental care and every other perks that middle-class children take for granted as a birthright. I was 21 years old before I inherited all these blessings. When I had been an orphan roaming the waterfront, I used to quietly ask God, why was I so bad lucky as to have been born in Jamaica and not in the USA? Why I, too, wouldn't have been a passenger aboard one of these luxurious ocean liners that used to sail in and out of Kingston Harbor. No, I was an American citizen, and the Army had given Dan Taylor US 5265255 the necessary discipline and self-respect to successfully travel the road of life. This is a guy who is rough with, petty Cosmetics. That guy I never did see the vision. Couldn't see Bob Marley vision. You see. During my 2-year stint in the army, I made sure to stay in touch with show business whenever possible. While on leave, I would make trips with groups like the Drifters. On my discharge from the U.S. Army on October 25, 1967, I immediately headed for New York City. There I charted the course which could enable me to renew my acquaintance with people such as Chuck Jackson and Little Anthony and the Imperials. This time, however, as their manager, not their valet. How I became the manager of Little Anthony and the Imperials is a kind of storybook dream. The Imperials were then the client of the William Morris booking agency, then run by Lee Solomon, who had himself discovered Peggy Lee and who had the power to affect the career of black performers seeking to cross over to the white charts. The group was appearing at the Newport Beach, that a bubblegum producer that we have. We don't go and promote bubblegum music then time there, and not anything culturally. It's the same effect, the same thing that's messing with us today. The group was appearing at Newport Beach Hotel in Miami when a different development between the Imperial and the agency. Phil Strasberg, manager of the Imperials, was pushed by the Imperials to ask for a meeting with Lee Solomon to discuss a problem. I myself was the road manager at the time. It seemed obvious to me that Phil did not want to call the meeting, that he had little confidence in his ability to speak for the group and solve its problem. On the day of the meeting, he made his insecurity even more obvious by first sitting on the ledge beside Lee Solomon instead of on our side of the table, and by opening the meeting with the remark, "Well, we are here because the boys have a problem." I could immediately feel a charge run through all of us. And when I saw Sammy Strain, one of the Imperial, glare at Lee, I knew the battle would not end there. As soon as we left the meeting and were headed downstairs, Sammy told Phil he was fired. When Phil recovered and asked why, a thunder of voices brought home to him the simple truth that as their manager, the Imperial expected their problem to be his problem too. With Phil gone, I took over the duties of the group's manager while we searched for a replacement. One candidate we contacted was J.W. Alexander, who was then also managing Sam Cooke and Lou Rawls. He came and listened to the group report on their plan and on what they had been doing while I acted as their temporary manager. When the group had finished, JW said, "You guys don't need a manager. You have a manager." To me, he added, "Dan, you are a manager. You are their manager." He then turned to them and said, "Give Dan the money and the position." That was how I became the manager of the Imperials. In that role, I met the challenge and actually took the group to their heights with such hits as Going Out of My Mind and Hurt So Bad. When there were no limits, I did what very few managers had done. For 12 years, I kept them steadily working Las Vegas. My experience as a musical group's manager seasoned me in the intricacies of the business. I gained entry into the world of the mafia, with whom, like all managers, I became closely associated, developing a lasting friendship with many of their members. Some years later in Las Vegas, I met JW again, this time in the company of Colonel Parker, who was with Elvis Presley, the main attraction playing the casinos. I had just returned from Jamaica and was wearing a straw hat as JW was telling Colonel Parker how I had got my start. The Colonel reached over, took off my hat, placed it on his own head and said, "From all I have heard from JW, you have started a brilliant career and you are going to be big." I never saw that hat again. Over the years, as our paths crisscrossed in Las Vegas, I developed a good relationship both with Elvis and his manager. I learned a lot from the Colonel. I admired his shrewdness. He looked after Elvis well and always made sure that his star dressed and that always made sure that his star dressed and that. During the very early days, his concerts were always full, even if the tickets had to be given away. I like Elvis a lot too. To me, he seemed like a real person. Even though he was a megastar, he never swaggered around playing the part. One day we were at a house little Anthony had rented in Las Vegas when, at 8 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang. I answered it and there was Elvis with 4 bodyguards. He was dressed in a smart jumpsuit, but not the fancy kind he wore on stage. He came in and he sat on the sofa talking to little Anthony. We were amused to see that when he got up to go to the bathroom, all 4 bodyguards automatically got up, followed him, and stood waiting outside the door. Elvis didn't seem to find this behavior odd. We ended up at the Sahara Hotel where the guys ordered something to eat. Burgers, I think, for dinner in the dressing room. Anthony and Elvis were very relaxed with each other and get along well. When they were together, they reminisced about music, about the good old days. Elvis joked about the first time they met. They had met in 1958 on the Ed Sullivan Show. He told us that as soon as he started singing, the camera moved from his body and stayed riveted to his head. I respected Elvis and the Colonel. And when the Colonel predicted that I'd make it big, I knew deep down that my love and respect for the industry would prove his words correct. Little did I know that marking my mark would involve me with reggae's biggest performer, Bob Marley. So as big as you try to portray yourself to be before Bob Marley, I even admitting here that the biggest you'll ever be is with Bob Marley until. See? Now this seems like chapter 4. No, this is the man. See, now we are going. Chapter 4 is another chapter. It's the next chapter. You see it? More. Yeah, so I'm going to chapter 4, so I'm going to make that one longer. I was at home in Los Angeles one day attending to the business of Little Anthony and the Imperials when the phone rang. It was Stephen Hill, Sr., and a visitor to Los Angeles from Jamaica. He asked if I would help him find a singer to do a benefit for the Trenchtown Sports Complex in Jamaica. His son had become involved with Member of Parliament Anthony Spalding and was very keen on the benefit. He invited me to the Hyatt House Hotel on Sunset Boulevard, where he was staying, to go over names of possible artists we might ask to perform. Yo, this chapter is where we met Bob Marley. I don't think this should read on the back of any other chapter. This chapter should start of its own. You get this? So I'm gonna reserve this till the next reading, which is quite soon. I'm getting excited now, so obviously the next reading is gonna be soon. Yes, and I give thanks. Rastafari. See it? Share, like, and subscribe.